Okay, I'm going to quickly cover a lot of ground just to share some stories and tie up some loose ends. This is one of the people from the U.S. Space Command, one of the former commanders. And Dave earlier showed you about the vision for 2020. This is the planning document that came out in the late 90s saying that the U.S. would be the master of space. This is the headquarters building in Colorado, Peterson Air Force Base, and you see the Master of Space logo that they also wear as a patch on their uniform. During the first President Bush's time, the Persian Gulf War that began in 1990, they said it was the first space war, that the U.S. essentially used that war to field test the entire space warfare system. The U.S. pre-identified all of Saddam Hussein's military targets in the first 2 to 3 days of the war, bombed 95% of those targets. So the war was over after the first 2 or 3 days. But then they extended the war for several weeks and practiced using the whole space warfare technology system. So the whole thing was really a phony war, that it was just a war to field test the entire space warfare operation. And so all the pollution, all the money, all the killing, everything else was unnecessary. There was really no war to have. It was just a field test for the program. The second space war, because after the first space war and the Gulf War, they learned a lot of new things, and they wanted to field test it again. So in 1999, they ran the second field test, and this was the Yugoslavia War, where the nation of Yugoslavia was bombed by the Clinton administration. You might remember that we bombed the Chinese embassy, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we used the wrong map." That's a lie. They have everything mapped out. They know where everything is. They bombed the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia in Belgrade just as a warning, just as a statement that we can do whatever we want anytime we want. So that was the second space war, another unneeded war, unnecessary war, done to, again, field test the new changes in the program. Another program within this whole space technology field is Cyber Command. One of the original ideas was that the United States would destroy other countries' satellites, other countries' military satellites, giving us control and domination of space. But the word got around that blowing up other countries' satellites would create so much space debris, space junk orbiting the Earth, that it would put in danger our own satellites as well. They would be hit with orbiting space debris. And so they came up with cyber operations as a way to have warfare in space without blowing up another country's satellite. And so cyber has been a program on steroids in the last 10, 15 years. The National Security Agency, also space connected, using military satellites to essentially spy on all of the people on the whole planet, intercepting all phone, fax, and email communications, using bases in northern England where Dave lives, in Yorkshire, and in places like Australia, a base called Pine Gap, using those bases to communicate with the satellites to intercept all communications around the world. The National Reconnaissance Office also runs all of the U.S. military satellites. They're the office in charge of controlling U.S. military satellites. So earlier it's been mentioned that Ronald Reagan essentially got all of these Star Wars programs going. This is when I got involved in 1982. From there, it went on to Bill Clinton, the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, and NATO expansion. A lot of people don't know that it was Bill Clinton that began the NATO expansion, moving up to encircle Russia. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the unification of East and West Germany, the United States promised Russia that we will not expand NATO 1 inch towards your country, because we understand that the reunification of Germany is a big problem to Russia. And so Gorbachev was promised that that wouldn't happen. But Clinton began the expansion of NATO to encircle Russia and the further development of missile defense. And now today we have the Missile Defense Agency. Obama, a lot of people don't know, has been the major escalator of missile defense during his 2 terms in office. And now these programs are on steroids. This is the Aegis Ashore. You've heard of it several times. They take this missile defense system off these warships that are made where Mary Beth and I live in Bath, Maine, and they're now putting them on land. And just last year, under the Obama administration, one of these Aegis Ashore facilities was opened up in Romania, and next year it'll be opened up in Poland. This is the one in Romania. This is an X-37, a military space plane. This is part of U.S. first strike attack strategy. Dave earlier said that this plane has shown that it can stay in orbit. It's like a super drone. It stayed in orbit for an entire year. Well, every year the U.S. Space Command practices a first strike attack on Russia and China. And one of the weapons that is used in that first strike attack is the military space plane, the successor to the shuttle. And its job would be to fly down from orbit and drop an attack on Russia and China. This is a program called Rods from God. The Pentagon calls it Rods from God. And this is also part of first strike attack strategy. They would drop these steel rods from space, gathering speed as they came down, and their job would be to take out the underground nuclear silos of Russia and China in a U.S. first strike attack. As a result of this growing problem of control and domination of space, the United States and China have both tested what are called anti-satellite weapons. China tested one in 2007, the United States in 2008, destroying one of their old military satellites. And as a result of this, I've already mentioned space debris. There's more than 25,000 pieces of space debris orbiting the Earth, having to be tracked on the radar screens at the Space Command, because it's a danger to the satellites that are now in space. And many people believe that someday space debris will crash into the International Space Station and other satellites, creating an escalating effect that will create so much debris in space that we will be entombed to the planet forever, that we will literally not be able to get off the planet because we would not be able to get a rocket through the minefield of space debris. It's becoming such a massive, massive problem today. This is showing how drones communicate with satellites and ground stations. Again, the same thing. Go ahead. And then Dave talked about prompt global strike. This is a program that Russia and China are very worried about. Prompt global strike means the U.S. would be able to launch a conventional attack on Russia and China within 1 hour, any part of the world. The problem is, go ahead to the next one. When you launch prompt global strike, Russia doesn't know whether it's a nuclear weapon or a conventional weapon coming their way. They have to plan that it's a nuclear weapon, and they have to respond accordingly. So this prompt global strike program is highly escalating, highly dangerous, highly provocative, and the US is pushing it ahead very quickly. I mentioned earlier that the US Space Command every year has an annual computer war game where they practice a US first strike attack. They call it the red team versus the blue team. And in that first strike attack, the military space plane and other US weapons like prompt global strike are used to try to take out Russia and Chinese nuclear forces. They then try to fire a retaliatory response. And it is at that time that so-called missile defense systems would be used to supposedly pick off their retaliatory strike. So today, the United States military budget, I don't ever use the word defense because it's not about defense. It's not the Defense Department, it's not the defense budget, it's not defense spending, it's military spending, it's offense, and it's about control and domination of the planet on behalf of corporate interest. And this just gives you an idea of the levels of military spending today. No one is close to us. And so all the hype we've been hearing about Russia and all the hype we hear about China, it's just the same old story, just like the Persian Gulf War was, just like the Yugoslavia War was, just like the takedown of Libya was, and now this takedown of Syria that the US is trying to do today. It's all hype, and we've got to fight against it. Thank you very much.